Jack trudged along the desolate road, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each weary step. The night air was crisp, biting at his exposed skin, and the stars above were obscured by a thick blanket of clouds. He had been travelling for what felt like an eternity, though in truth it had only been a few weeks. His mind was a maze of fragmented memories and unanswered questions, each step echoing the uncertainty that gnawed at his soul. Just as he was about to give in to the exhaustion, a soft glow appeared on the horizon. Squinting through the darkness, Jack saw it, a small inviting pub standing in stark contrast to the bleak landscape around him. The sign above the door swung gently in the breeze, reading, "The Timeless Pub." Jack hesitated for a moment before pushing open the heavy wooden door and stepping inside. Warmth enveloped him instantly, a stark difference from the cold outside. The interior was cozy and dimly lit, with wooden beams overhead and a roaring fireplace casting flickering shadows across the room. He made his way to the bar, where a woman with an ageless quality and kind eyes stood polishing glasses. "Welcome," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Eliza." "Jack," he replied, feeling a strange sense of comfort in this place. He settled onto a stool and glanced around, noticing a few other patrons scattered throughout the pub, each lost in their own thoughts. Eliza placed a drink before him, without asking what he wanted. "On the house," she said with a knowing look. "You look like you could use it." Jack took a tentative sip, and immediately a wave of nostalgia washed over him. He was transported back to his childhood, running through fields of golden wheat, his laughter mingling with the wind's song. The memory was so vivid that he could almost feel the sun on his face and hear his mother's voice calling him home for supper. Blinking away tears, he looked up at Eliza in astonishment. "What is this place?" he asked softly. Eliza smiled enigmatically. "This is no ordinary pub," she said quietly. "Here, each drink reveals something about your life, a truth you may have forgotten or never understood." Before Jack could respond, another patron caught his eye, a woman dressed in Victorian-era clothing, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing as she sipped her drink slowly. "Would you like to hear her story?" Eliza asked gently. Jack nodded, curiosity piqued despite himself. And so began Jack's journey into the lives of those who had also found their way to the timeless pub. Jack watched as the Victorian woman set her glass down, a distant look in her eyes. Eliza moved towards her with a gentle smile. "This is Clara," she introduced. Clara looked up, startled for a moment, then offered Jack a polite nod. "Hello," Jack said softly, feeling an odd connection to this stranger from another time. Eliza poured Clara another drink, and as she took a sip, the air around them seemed to shimmer. In an instant, Jack was no longer in the pub, but standing in a grand ballroom filled with elegantly dressed people. The sound of a waltz played by a live orchestra floated through the air. Clara stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching couples twirl gracefully under crystal chandeliers. "This was my debutante ball," Clara's voice narrated, though she did not move her lips. I was supposed to meet my future husband that night. Jack saw a younger version of Clara, radiant and hopeful, gliding across the floor with a handsome young man. But as the memory unfolded, it became clear that her heart belonged to someone else, a forbidden love with a man of lower social standing. The scene shifted to a secret garden where Clara met her true love in stolen moments, their whispers filled with promises they could never keep. The pain of societal expectations and family obligations weighed heavily on her shoulders, leading to an inevitable heartbreak when they were discovered. As the memory faded, Jack found himself back in the pub, feeling the weight of Clara's sorrow as if it were his own. She looked at him with tears glistening in her eyes. "I never got to choose my own path," she whispered. "I was bound by duty and expectation." Jack nodded, understanding more than he expected to. "Sometimes we lose ourselves trying to meet others' expectations," he said, quietly. Before he could say more, another patron caught his attention, a man in military uniform sitting silently at the far end of the bar. "That's Tom," Eliza said softly, as she followed Jack's gaze. "He has a story too." Jack turned his attention to Tom, intrigued by what he might learn next. Tom looked up as Jack approached, his eyes betraying a depth of sorrow and experience. Eliza handed Tom a drink, her expression gentle and understanding. As Tom took a sip, the pub seemed to dissolve around them. Jack found himself standing in the midst of a battlefield, the air thick with smoke, and the sounds of gunfire echoing in the distance. Soldiers moved with a sense of urgency, their faces grim and determined. Tom stood among them, younger, but unmistakably the same man, his uniform dusty and worn. "This was Normandy," Tom's voice narrated, filled with a mix of pride and pain. D-Day. The scene shifted to the chaos of the landing, bullets whizzing past and explosions shaking the ground. Jack could feel the tension in the air, the palpable fear and courage that drove these men forward despite overwhelming odds. Tom's memory focused on a small group of soldiers huddled together, their camaraderie evident in the way they moved and communicated without words. They were more than comrades. They were brothers bound by shared experiences and mutual reliance. As they pushed forward, one of Tom's closest friends was hit by enemy fire. The young soldier fell, and despite the danger, Tom rushed to his side, holding him as he drew his last breath. The grief was raw and intense, a wound that had never fully healed. Back in the pub, Jack saw tears glistening in Tom's eyes as he set his glass down with a trembling hand. "I promised I'd bring him home," Tom said quietly. "But I couldn't." Jack felt a lump in his throat, understanding the weight of survivor's guilt that Tom carried. "You did everything you could," Jack said gently. "Sometimes that's all we can do." Tom nodded slowly, as if trying to accept those words for himself. Before Jack could say more, he noticed another patron, a woman with flowers woven into her hair and a faraway look in her eyes. "That's Lily," Eliza said softly, her gaze following Jack's. Jack turned his attention to Lily, ready to hear her story next. Lily looked up as Jack approached, her eyes reflecting a mix of wistfulness and resolve. Eliza handed her a drink with a knowing smile, and as Lily took a sip, the pub began to fade once more. Jack found himself standing in the middle of a bustling city street, the sounds of the 1960s filling the air, honking cars, chatter of passers-by, and the distant strumming of guitars. The scene was vibrant and alive, bursting with colour and energy. Lily stood on a small stage in a dimly lit club, her fingers dancing over the strings of an acoustic guitar. Her voice was hauntingly beautiful, weaving through the room and capturing the attention of everyone present. Jack watched as she poured her heart into each note, her music a raw expression of her dreams and struggles. "This was my first big performance," Lily's voice narrated, filled with both pride and melancholy. "I had dreams of making it big, of sharing my music with the world." The scene shifted to a recording studio where Lily worked tirelessly, her passion evident in every strum and lyric. But as she pursued her dreams, she faced countless obstacles, record labels that wanted to change her sound, societal expectations that tried to confine her, and personal sacrifices that weighed heavily on her spirit. Jack saw Lily standing before a crowd at a protest rally, her music becoming a voice for change and hope in turbulent times. Despite the challenges, she remained true to herself, using her talent to inspire others, even as it took a toll on her own well-being. As the memory faded, Jack found himself back in the pub, feeling the weight of Lily's journey and the sacrifices she had made. "I gave up so much for my music," Lily said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "But I never regretted staying true to who I was." Jack nodded, deeply moved by her story. "Your music touched lives," he said gently. "That's something no one can take away from you." Lily smiled through her tears, gratitude shining in her eyes. Before Jack could say more, Eliza approached him with a final drink, a special concoction that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "It's your turn now," she said softly. Jack took a deep breath and accepted the drink, ready to confront his own past. Jack hesitated for a moment, the weight of the drink in his hand feeling symbolic of the journey he was about to undertake. With a deep breath, he took a sip. The pub around him began to dissolve, replaced by a memory that surged forward with startling clarity. He found himself standing in a sunlit meadow, the air filled with the scent of wildflowers and the gentle hum of bees. A younger version of himself ran through the field, laughing freely as his mother called out to him from a distance. It was a memory of pure innocence and joy, one that had been buried beneath years of hardship and regret. "This is where it all began," Jack's voice narrated, tinged with nostalgia and longing. "Before life became complicated." The scene shifted abruptly to a dark night, rain pouring down as Jack stood beside a car wreckage on the side of a lonely road. His heart pounded as he saw himself frantically pulling at the door, trying to free his younger brother trapped inside. The memory was raw and painful, filled with the sounds of sirens and the helplessness that had haunted him ever since. "I couldn't save him," Jack's voice broke, as he relived the tragic moment. No matter how hard I tried. Back in the pub, Jack's hands trembled as he set the glass down, tears streaming down his face. "I've been running from this for so long," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Blaming myself for something I couldn't control." Eliza placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes we carry burdens that aren't ours to bear," she said gently. "But facing them is the first step towards healing." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to acknowledge the pain and begin to let go. As dawn approached, Eliza spoke softly to all the patrons gathered in the pub. "Each of you has faced your past tonight," she said warmly. "Now you must decide. Return to your own times with newfound understanding, or stay here, where time stands still, but truths are revealed." Jack looked around at Clara, Tom, and Lily, seeing reflections of his own journey in their eyes. The pub was filled with a heavy silence, as each patron contemplated their decision. Clara, Tom, and Lily all exchanged glances, each of them weighing the significance of their experiences and the choices before them. Clara was the first to speak. "I've spent so long dwelling on what could have been," she said softly. "But I realize now that I need to let go and move forward. I choose to return." Tom nodded in agreement. "I've carried my guilt like a shadow," he said. "But it's time I forgive myself and honor the memory of my fallen comrades by living my life fully. I choose to return as well." Lily smiled, her eyes reflecting a newfound clarity. "My music has always been my truth," she said. "I will continue to share it with the world and inspire others, just as it inspires me. I choose to return." Eliza turned to Jack, her gaze steady and compassionate. "And you, Jack?" she asked gently. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision. He had found answers in this enchanted place, but he knew his journey was far from over. "I choose to return," he said firmly. "There are still things I need to face, and people I need to make amends with. But now I can do it with a clearer heart and mind." Eliza nodded approvingly and handed each of them a final drink, one that shimmered with an ethereal light. "This is your parting gift," she said softly. "It will solidify the insights you've gained tonight and guide you on your path forward." Jack raised his glass along with Clara, Tom, and Lily. As they drank, a warm sensation spread through him, filling him with a sense of peace and resolve. The pub began to fade around them, replaced by the familiar surroundings of their respective times. Jack found himself back on the desolate road where his journey had begun, but now he felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of his past. As he walked towards the rising sun, he knew that while the path ahead might still be challenging, he was no longer running from his memories, but embracing them as part of his story.